welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we're talking about everything Le Cordon Bleu themed. So if you remember, sometime last year I went to pastry school and I was there for a total of 3.5 months. That's not the full course, but I had so many questions. If you don't know, I have an Instagram called Love at First Table where I basically asked you guys all of these questions about school when I was in it. I did record that video at least 2 times after, but I lost the footage both times. So let's hope third time lucky. Question 1 is, how did you apply and what are the entry requirements? The application process was pretty straightforward. What you did need was a CV, a statement, previous work experience if you had any, previous food experience if you hadn't. It was not a requirement. Never worked in food before. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work in food, and I'm here to tell you that it's okay and you can. It's not that big of a deal, but it's really easy to apply to. The personal statement I wrote in the course of 1 evening. It didn't take me very long to do, especially because I'm really passionate about it. So like, it was really easy for me to write about that. They need like very basic things that university or higher education would need. So that's a CV, a personal statement, previous work experience if you have any, previous education, where you've studied and what level you've studied till. The wonderful part about this school is that you didn't really need a lot of experience to get into culinary. It is kind of like a university, so I feel like if you've done O levels and A levels, you should be okay to go. There is no age limit, there is no age restriction, there's no nothing. You can be as young as 18 and as old as 65 and go to any of these courses. I applied sometime in June or July. I heard back from my application pretty quickly. I do think it's because I applied a little bit earlier than when the deadline closed. The deadline closes somewhere around August for the September semester. So you do have a lot of time to apply and get your visa sorted and all of that other stuff before you actually have to leave. I think also because they expect you to know nothing when you come into the school. There are no expectations about you to have any formal training or anything like that. I was in a class with 2 other formal chefs, pastry chefs, who've been working in the field for 45 years, and both of them were really, really good at their job, and they were like top achievers in our course. But that doesn't change the fact that they also had off days and they also had days where they didn't perform to the mark. And that just shows that culinary really is one of those careers that it really depends on your mindset and how your day is going for how your day in the kitchen is going. For all my brown girlies, I know the next question is going to be, what about visa? And I completely understand visa is one of the most stressful, if not the most stressful part of the entire process. Visa requirements are pretty different based on the country that you go to. I can only speak for the UK because it's the only place I've had experience in. So if I'd done the entire course for 9 months, then I would have needed the student visa. But because I was only there for 3.5, 4, I didn't need the student visa and I already had a visitor visa. I applied for a visitor visa in March of 2022. So I didn't really need a student visa to go. So I got really lucky in that regard because I was already in the visa process because I was going to go on a trip to see some of my friends. But it worked out in my favor that Le Cordon Bleu also happened. If you are thinking to apply, please look into your specific visa needs. If you need a student visa, if you don't need a student visa, and all of the other stuff, that's all on the UKIB website. I can link it all down below in case you want to read it. So the next question talks about costs. So upfront costs, scholarships, visa fees, etc. So both the patisserie and the culinary courses are divided into 3 terms. The first term is basic, the second is intermediate, and the third is advanced/expert. I only did the first cohort, which is the basic one. So because it's divided into 3, you can kind of like do the terms separately, which is what my initial idea was, that I'm going to do basic, and if I do well at basic or if I'm good at it, then I'll continue on. Sadly, that did not happen because of factors that are out of my control, but I did do the course for 3 months and that was great. So obviously it's going to be cheaper if you do a shorter course, like if you do only the 3 months. It's somewhere around, I think, £15,000 for the 9-month course, and I think it was somewhere around £6,000 for the 3-month course. The prices may have changed a little bit because I think they were revised last year when I was leaving. Okay, what's next? Then let's talk about scholarships. So there are a couple of scholarships. I think there are 3 or 4 scholarships. It's like a Julia Child scholarship. There's like another scholarship that is for just like skill-based workers in the UK. If I find them, I'll put the links again in the description below for you to see. I think what scholarships are for every university, master's program, whatever, please, please, please start researching at least 6 months before. They're really, really competitive to get into, and their deadlines are way before your course starts. So if you're really considering scholarships, and if you're thinking about sometime maybe like in 2024 you want to go to culinary school, I would highly, highly suggest start looking into scholarships now. The UK is quite expensive, so I will say please be wary of that. So your kind of upfront cost that you'll do is your tuition, your visa fees, your ticket fees, any extra equipment that they ask you to buy. In my first week of us being there, they asked us to buy a scale, piping bags, plastic containers, lunch boxes to take stuff home, cake boxes, and also when I got there I also had to buy safety shoes. They're basically steel capped shoes. You can get them in Crocs, you can get them in clogs, you can get them in like sneakers, whatever is comfortable for you. There's a shop in London that I visited where I went and bought them. That's the one that university referred us to, and everyone there was super helpful, and I tried on like 5 different pairs of shoes because I have a very particular shoe size. So it's always good to be safe than sorry. That cost around like £40 for a pair of shoes, and those are shoes that I will continue to wear in the kitchen when I work professionally and stuff like that. So I do see it as an investment, and £40 isn't that much for a pair of shoes that are supposed to keep you safe. So I'm just letting you know that if you are very serious about going, keep a £200-300 cushion so that you have that in your budget. Next question is, what is the timetable like? Okay, so the timetable, it was a bit not traditional. So it wasn't like every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday you have class at noon. Like that wasn't the timetable. Really differed from week to week. Because we're in London, there's not a lot of square footage. I think there was like probably like 10 kitchens in the entire school, and it was just like one long building. There was not a lot of like square footage. So they had to be really smart about like timetables and scheduling and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, in terms of learning, there are like 3 basic things that you need to know. The first are called demos. Demos are basically where you sit in a giant like auditorium sort of room. There are like cameras and mirrors and everything on top, and you basically watch the chef take you through the recipe step by step, and he's telling you things like, oh, you should look out for this, and if this splits then you can do that. And it's basically him taking you through the recipe and showing his way or her way into making an amazing dish. Then the second are called practicals. Practicals are basically scheduled after demos, so you can't have a practical if you haven't had the demo of that class. So if, for example, we're doing sorbet, you'll have a demo for sorbet either the morning of or the day before your practical, and then you're going to come in for your practical. An average of like 3 hours to get your dish ready. 3 hours may seem like a lot of time, but I promise you when you get in the kitchen it flies by, because it's not just one dish, but there are like multiple elements that they make you make, and then you kind of bring the entire dish together in the last like 15-20 minutes. Hi, this is editing to tell you that there was also a theory section that I completely forgot about, but it was basically classroom style. You sat down, they showed you presentations like this, and basically taught you theory of food, like on like a chemical level. So there were technically 4. Ignore chasing. Back to the video. And then the third would be exams. So with exams, throughout the course when we were doing our demos and doing our practicals, there would be a couple of dishes that would be like, this is an exam dish and you guys need to really pay attention. Exam dish days, even in the practical room, in the demo room, were pretty stressful because everyone wanted to do a good job. And because it was the first semester, I feel like everyone was a lot more stressed about examinations because none of us knew how it worked. So there were a lot of questions and there was a lot of eating the chef's head, but they all were really wonderful and they really took us through all of it. So in terms of timetables, the way that your day is structured is that you can have like an early morning class. So you can have like an early morning practical. So it usually is in blocks. So it's like 6 to 8 is one, 8 to 10 is one. I would usually be in the second block, which is the 8 a.m. class. So that would either be a practical or a demo. You can have days where you have like an 8 a.m. demo and then have nothing till like 2 p.m. Have like a 2 to 6 class and then like you could go home. So it really did depend. There were a lot of days where I would be done by like 11:30 and my day would be done for the day. And there were other days where I would be at school from like 8 to like 9 at night every day. It really depends on what group you're in and what course you're doing. But do know that the timetables are pretty erratic. But the wonderful thing about them is that once the timetable is set, it's usually set and your classes don't move up and down. So if you have any planning to do, any traveling to do, if you need to give your work like, oh, these are the times that I can work part-time. So those are all things that you can plan in advance. So it makes it easier that way because they are pretty strict about not changing the timetable unless something crazy comes up or there's a strike or something. In terms of courses, there are also like 3 main courses. The first is pastry, also known as patisserie. The second one is cuisine, also known as like actual culinary. And the third is boulangerie, also known as like bakery and bread making. The mistake I made is I thought that pastry and boulangerie would be in one, which it is, but only slightly. There's a lot of boulangerie in the second semester of patisserie, but I wasn't there for that one. So I really shot myself in the foot not doing that. But there are people I know who are doing pastry and boulangerie together, and the bread they would make, if I could go back, I would do the boulangerie course as well. Obviously, when you add another subject on, your timetable will get a bit more full. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for more like bakery, whatever, also sign up for boulangerie or make sure that the boulangerie that you want is in the course that you're applying for. There's also the Grand Diploma, which is kind of all of these courses together. So the Grand Diploma includes cuisine, pastry, boulangerie, and all of it. And at the end of the Grand Diploma, you have to not only come up with a restaurant concept, but a restaurant menu, an entree, a plated dessert, like a full menu for the end of your degree, which you also have to do in pastry and culinary, but those are just specifically for those. During the Grand Diploma, we're going absolutely mental because they had classes all day, every day from 8 to 8 every single day. So if you are thinking about doing the diploma, that is something that you must think about because it is very, very stressful. And if you remember my last video where we talked all about a day in the life of a pastry chef, there's so much you have to do preschool and after school. So just make sure that you're choosing a program or a course that you feel like you can actually excel in. You don't want to be put in the deep end and then put in an environment where all of these people are outperforming you and you just feel like a fraud and you feel like you're not good at any of this, and that's just going to hurt your self-esteem and hurt your ego. There are a lot of questions about this in terms of like my Muslim audience, and so many people are worried about the halal and haram ratios. I will say straight up that LCB were amazing about inclusivity and in terms of making sure that everyone in the class was comfortable. I'm not necessarily the best person to ask for this because I'm a Muslim that doesn't really care about cooking with alcohol because it does evaporate off. Anytime we had a demo and there had to be some sort of alcohol in a dish, before the chef would add it, always ask, is there anyone here that's a Muslim that can't drink for XYZ reasons? So anytime there was a show of hands, chef would make sure not to add it at all. At the end of every demo session, you would get to taste the dish that the chef had made. 1, for you to see the components of the dish, and 2, to see how everything gels properly, especially if it's like an exam dish because you are also graded on taste. The chefs were also really nice to help other Muslim students kind of find alternatives for a lot of things. So in terms of gelatin, they would say use agar. If you wanna maybe make this without the gelatin and you're making like a curd or something, just add more egg yolks. Like find a middle ground to help us give alternatives so that when we do cook in our own kitchens, we don't really have to be restrained to these particular ingredients. If you are very concerned about the halal haram, you do not need to add anything if you don't want to. Like there are 2 liqueurs that I remember. There was a coffee liqueur and a cherry liqueur. The coffee one for the coffee eclairs and the cherry one for the black forest dishes that I had to create myself that had a liqueur or had some sort of alcohol soaked sponge. I don't really enjoy booze soaked sponges, even though I enjoy booze. I don't enjoy booze soaked sponges. I think it takes a lot away from a dessert, and it can be a great dessert without it. So anytime there would be a practical where we'd have to make it, I would leave it out, because after the practicals you were allowed to take your dish back home. So I would leave it out because I would be the main person eating it. I know a lot of people did add it in, but you have the choice not to. And because the chefs don't really taste your food for every practical, the chefs don't really taste your food for every practical, which is weird because you think that you'd be great on taste, but I think also they've done these recipes so many times that they know what to look for. They do not need to taste it. They can like see your sponge and be like, okay, that's dense as hell. The only time you had to use alcohol for a dish was in your exam dish, because you were not the one eating those, but it was required in your recipe that if alcohol is given, you have to add it in. One other thing about cost that we haven't really talked about is living. Now, living was hard. Like, finding a place to live was really, really difficult for me. Mostly because I was only there for the 3 months. Like, I wasn't there for a very long time. And a lot of the places in London like want like at least a 6-month contract. There are very few people who are renting on a short let basis. But these are a few websites that I scoured day and night to basically find myself accommodation. Obviously, if you're going for a longer time, there are a couple of student halls like this one, and this one that are in the area and not a far commute. But I do think student halls become more expensive because you're getting less. You have to share a kitchen, your room is tiny, all of that stuff. Or you could like flat share with someone who's just as like-minded as you and get a pretty decent place to live that's not so far out. And the biggest perk is you can feed them at the end of every class. So that's in terms of living. I live next to Ladbroke Grove. It was a station called Latimer Road, and I found an Airbnb that was like a short let Airbnb. I found it on Spare Room because there were like things that I was specifically looking for. I also wanted a place with an oven and a decent sized kitchen, because I did know that practice really helps me, and I could afford to get a place with a kitchen. I very much lucked out, and this place was gorgeous. I loved the neighborhood, I loved the flat. Other than the fact that there was a rat infestation, that place was amazing. I think somewhere around 250 to 350 pounds a week, because this is London and shit is expensive. If you're living alone, think around like 250 to 350 pounds a week with bills included. If you're sharing, then somewhere around 150 to like 250, 275 a week should be like the normal. A lot of people ask why Cordon Bleu and why like nowhere else. Selfishly, I love London and I love the UK, and I have a lot of friends in the UK, and Le Cordon Bleu was a dream of mine for a very long time. And I originally wanted to go to Paris and study at the first Le Cordon Bleu, because I was like, that's the one Julia Child went to, that's the one I want to go to, blah blah. I love Julia Child, she's like everything to me. So I really wanted to go to Le Cordon Bleu Paris, but so many classes were taught in French, and like I don't know French well enough to like do well at like those courses. So I decided that I'll just go to London instead, because it's just as far, and I was also lucky enough to like know London. I've done my undergraduate there, so I know the tube system, I know where to like look for houses, I know like the baseline for like living on like a week-to-week basis. So it was pretty easy for me to do. I do also know a couple of friends who've gone to Le Cordon Bleu Istanbul, and that's also a really great option for a lot of Pakistanis, because Istanbul, Turkey and Pakistan have really good relations. Getting a student visa is pretty easy, all of that stuff, and like studying gastronomy it's also really, really good there. And I know a couple of really successful chefs who have graduated from there. So it's not unheard of that you need to go to like the most expensive school to get the most expensive education. All across their campuses, all over the world, it's all the same program. So no matter where you go, you will get the same program. Second reason I wanted to go to Le Cordon Bleu is because it's a name, it's prestigious, it's what everyone knows. And it's one of those schools that a lot of my chef friends have told me that, oh, if you go to Le Cordon Bleu, you're the real fucking deal. because not only do they train you, but there's such a high standard for hygiene, for uniform, for timeliness, for innovation, for creativity. Like there's a huge standard, and the standard of people that are there as well is like mind-blowing. Like all of those were like kind of factors as to why I chose LCB. There are two other schools that kind of came on my radar after Le Cordon Bleu. One is CIA, which is the Culinary Institute of America. I've heard it's good, but a lot of their locations are quite remote and they're quite in an area where you need either car by or live in like small suburbs. So it's not like the most central, and that's really difficult when you're doing food because so much of it is sourcing and going to the grocery store and blah blah blah. So I don't have any experience in it, so I can't recommend it. But from what I've heard, CIA is also pretty good. So if you're in America or want to go to America, CIA is something you should look about. The second school is called Leeds or Keats. I don't know, I'll put the thing here. But that's a new school that's just opened, I think in the past 2 years, also in London. And it's kind of like a lower cost Le Cordon Bleu. They're trying to do what Le Cordon Bleu is doing, but they're doing it in smaller classes, more focused and stuff like that. And they have a couple of short courses that happen all the time. So if you're interested, maybe you can go for a short course on like a visitor visa if you can afford it. Cordon Bleu also has a bunch of short courses, weekend courses, weekend classes, one-off classes, 2-3 month long part-time classes. So if you are in the area and if you're working somewhere, you can also do them side by side. It is challenging, but I do know people who've done it and have graduated and are doing really well in the culinary space. For all my Pakistani girlies and gays, there is also a bunch of schools that we have in Pakistan. The first is Gotham, which is up in Lahore. I've heard okay things about it. It's not the best in terms of what they're teaching you. There's not a lot of finesse for what I see in terms of like final dishes, plating, cleanliness, whatever. I follow them pretty religiously on social media, so I do see what they do. There are also some really big chefs that have gone there. They've studied there, it's become a passion, they've refined their skills, and they're doing great now. Second one is MasterChef Pakistan, a masterclass sort of environment. So those are two options that you can totally look at. One's in Lahore and the other one I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's also somewhere in Punjab. If you want to like put your little toes in the water and be like, ooh, let me see how I feel about this culinary thing, start it on your own, do it by yourself, go intern at a place, go stage at like a bakery, a patisserie, whatever. Go and ask people, yo, I don't want money, I just want to learn, can I please work here for a month? And like 80% of the time people will be like, sure, yeah, come. If obviously that comes from a very privileged position as well, where you do not need to be paying for your housing, your living, your food, whatever, and you're trying to figure out a path, maybe take 6 months off from your education, do that stuff, see how you feel about it before you take the big leap and the big jump to go into culinary. And now the final question, was it worth it? Yes and no. Let me explain. So it was worth it in terms of techniques, in terms of refining myself, in terms of confidence, and all of that other stuff that I wasn't getting for myself, working for myself in my home kitchen. So that was really amazing, and that was 100% worth it. I feel like you could totally have that same amount of finesse and whatever without the huge price tag of LCB. Obviously it's beautiful, it's a great school, it's great on your resume and all of that stuff, but it's not necessary. It's not the end all be all to go into culinary. A lot of people I know, chefs, wannabe chefs, aren't formally trained, and I think that's the beauty of them, because once you become formally trained, there's like a specific way that you start thinking, and it's very like whereas when you're kind of in the other state, you're like flowing and being like, okay, maybe this could work and maybe that could work. So there is a lot of creativity on this side. I'm someone who loves structure. I love a routine. I love feeling like I'm in a classroom. So I loved it for that reason. I did have some weird interaction with a couple of them, but like 80% of them are really nice, and they all are really sweet, and they really want you to succeed. So the grading is tough, but it's not super tough. They always want you to pass. They are always willing to give you a helping hand. That was like one of the first lessons we did, was like to make a paper piping bag, and I went and annoyed Chef Matthew about it every single time I had a class with him. So that was like at least like 6 or 7 times. I went up to that man, I was like, please teach me how to make it again, because I knew that we'd need it for the exam. And it was just one of those techniques that I couldn't get down. So after class, he would like stay back and he would help me make it, which is also really, really appreciative. The other thing I love about the school is that everyone there loves food. Everyone there is obsessed with food. They're not there because it's just another degree. They're not there because they don't care about it. They're super, super, super passionate about it. So it was really, really wonderful to see a lot of people who are also in love with food as much as I am. You know, having conversations before class around the coffee corner. Oh, what did you make for dinner last night? Oh, actually I tried this recipe and then I replaced this with that, and oh, you should try this, and this is what I'm making for my Christmas dinner. And it was like all of these conversations that surrounded food and surrounded people's love for food. And I think that is something that's completely priceless and completely worth the money, because I've never really been in an environment where I feel like I belong. Obviously people in Pakistan love food, but people don't really speak the language of food. You know, if I say that, oh, I made a liver pate and I made some rosemary crackers with sourdough discard, a lot of people are not going to know what I'm talking about, like, at all. But the thing is, in that environment, everyone did, because everyone had such a crazy passion for food. They would be like, oh, I bought this new cookbook, oh, I actually follow this new chef and you should follow him, and he makes such good food, and dude, I follow this person's recipe and their blog is amazing. So like, and it was just like one of those environments where it felt like my Instagram was coming into real life, because all of these people who loved food and talked about food and all of that stuff, like, they all came together and everyone was just happy to be there. Everyone was, it was 6 in the morning, it was 7 in the morning, nobody's had their morning coffee, nobody had time to have breakfast, but everyone is happy to be in the kitchen. And that is one of the feelings that I don't think is replaceable or purchasable. It's just one of those things that if you're lucky to experience, you're lucky to experience it. In terms of cons, it was expensive, it was really stressful, and some of the chefs were really mean to you for like no reason, and there was like a really, really high standard. As somebody who's pretty high standard in yourself, it was an environment I really enjoyed. It's an environment I really thought I thrived in, so I really wasn't that upset about it. It was difficult, but it was also one of those things that I was feeling very, very fulfilled at the end of the day. For me, I do think that the degree was pretty worth it, and if I had the time, the money, I would go back and I would finish the degree, maybe even do the culinary one, because as much as I love pastry, I also do love actual culinary. Like, a lot of cuisine chefs did tell me that it's stressful. That's about it. Those are all the questions I have for you guys today. If you have any more questions, or if I haven't answered any of your questions, please either DM me on IG or leave me a comment down below, and I will try to get to them as soon as possible, hopefully without my footage being corrupted this time. If you ever want to chat, if you ever want to ask a question that you think is a bit weird to comment, send me a DM. Not a big deal, okay? Please like the video if you liked it, and if you love it, please give me a sub. It would mean the world and more. Love you lots.